The Taliban absolutely love to make rules for the people of Afghanistan. But what about following them on their own? Taliban official Abdul Latif Mansoor traveled to Uzbekistan despite UN sanctions. He says his objective was to discuss the import of electricity with the Uzbek officials. But does that give him the right to go against the United Nations? And what is the UN going to do about this? First, let me give you some background here. The United Nations Security Council passed a resolution. In fact, as many as 135 Taliban leaders and organizations affiliated with the group are subject to sanctions. And these sanctions also included travel bans, meaning Taliban officials legally do not have the freedom to travel to these countries. However, the UN lifted the travel restrictions on 13 Taliban leaders under special conditions. The bans were essentially lifted so that the officials could participate in peace talks with the US in Doha. The UN Security Council regularly renewed the exemptions for the peace talks. But this did not last for long, as the Taliban failed to uphold its end of the bargain. The West challenged the exemptions in August last year. Taliban did not respect human rights of all Afghans. It failed to form an inclusive government or fight terrorism as it promised. And after America's withdrawal from Afghanistan and the Taliban's return to power, Afghan women have been suffering. The Taliban stopped girls' education. It removed women from workplaces. Afghan women are also subjected to restrictions on their movements. And seeing the situation, the United Nations reimposed the travel bans on Taliban leaders. But they don't seem to be respecting the sanctions, and that's the problem here. The Taliban Energy and Water Minister Abdul Latif Mansoor still traveled to Uzbekistan, and Tashkent allowed it. It's true that the countries have open borders, but does that justify going against the UN regulations? Taliban has been already exercising unchecked powers. It is putting impositions on women, violating their rights, their basic rights. And what is the US doing about this? Where are the American diplomats or the UN officials for that matter? Former US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad was America's special ambassador for Afghan reconciliation with the Taliban, remember? Where is he now? Why isn't he saying anything as the Taliban leaders conveniently violate the peace agreement? While the West opposed the travel exemptions on the Taliban, two superpowers, Russia and China, were advocating for them. Chinese officials, in fact, argued against linking human rights violations to travel bans. They deemed it counterproductive. Meanwhile, Pakistan has also supported Islamic groups like the Taliban. It labels this interference as strategic depth. The country has historically followed this policy towards Afghanistan. Now, what does it mean for India? Let me tell you, Pakistan attempts to control Afghanistan as a political pawn and a strategic hedge against India. And India slammed China and Pakistan at the UN Security Council recently. It called out the countries for justifying terrorism and protecting the terrorists in multilateral platforms. Pakistan is not a member of the Security Council, but it can attend the meeting as it is an open debate. Pakistan denies all claims. In turn, it accuses India of funding terrorism. Both China and Pakistan have been supporting terrorist organizations. China has been shielding terrorists based in Pakistan. It has saved them from being designated by the UN Security Council as individuals linked to the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Why is China doing so? To shield the terrorists from UN sanctions, which include assets freeze, travel ban, and arms embargo. Now, is this bad news for India? It most probably is. India is Pakistan and China's common enemy. both the countries don't miss opportunities to assert territorial authority at the borders. Pakistan has orchestrated multiple terror attacks. Keeping that in mind, Pakistan and China's support for the Taliban does ring alarm bells. And if the West or the UN members will be quiet on Taliban's impositions, it is a matter of concern, to say the least. If the Taliban's actions continue to go unchecked, what does it mean for Afghanistan? The country is struggling under the Islamic regime's rule. Human rights have gone for a toss. Women are being erased from public spaces. Amid this, if the Islamic regime is not disputed, if it is not held accountable for its wrongdoings, and if the UN sanctions are not respected, the situation will only worsen for the people of Afghanistan. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.